Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, my name is Muhammad Ralifansyah. I'm from English Department, 5th semester, morning class, University of Pekalongan. In this opportunity, I would like to represent the material Interpreting of Education. Since the last presentation, me and my group had a mistake. We didn't read the wall of instruction, so we need the information about the book that being a source. So we will sorry about that, and we would like fulfill this presentation redemption. So this material tell us about the interpreters work in educational setting. First, a note of terminology. In this chapter, for the interpret of sign language, the word deaf is written with a capital letter D. The distinction of deaf with a small d has been widely used to refer to deafness as an audiological condition. Deaf is an expression that recognizes the shared experience of those who share the values, norms, and beliefs of deaf culture. In this chapter, we chosen to use deaf and hard of hearing out of respect for those who generally identify with the deaf culture and those who typically identify with the hearing world but still use sign language as a primary means of communication. And then, where educational interpreters work. Interpreters work in a wide array of educational settings. They work in primary, secondary, and post-secondary schools to interpret between students, staff, faculty, administration, parents or guardians, and or other stakeholders. For spoken language interpreters, the most common form of interpreting in these venues is between parents who do not speak the language of the school and teacher or other staff. Sign language interpreters, on the other hand, frequently work full-time in educational setting. As they interpret for students throughout their daily activities. Other sign language interpreters interpret between deaf teachers and hearing parents and school personnel. Perhaps interpreting class content into spoken English, or interpreting meetings or school-wide events. Interpreters might also work in vocational training or adult educational classes. Educational interpreter training and qualification. As a result of legislation, supply and demand, and public perception, interpreters working in public school in the US have historically been underqualified and underprepared. In fact, many people hired to interpret in schools have not yet mastered their working language. Effects of legislation. In 1991, and in response to a need for an evaluation designed to assess the interpreting skills of individuals working with students in school setting, Boystown National Research Hospital in Omaha, Nebraska designed and piloted an assessment instrument called the Educational Interpreter Performance Assessment. Currently, at least 29 U.S. states use the APA to meet state qualification standard for educational sign language interpreters working in primary and secondary setting. According to the APA website, candidates who take this assessment are rated on grammatically skills, use of prosody or intonation, grammar, and space. Vocabulary, ability to use a wide range of vocabulary, accurate use of finger spelling and numbers. And then specialization, skills and training. There are few opportunities to specialize as an interpreter in educational contexts. In fact, a web search reveals only 1 or 2 university programs for spoken language and a handful for sign language interpreting focus on working in educational setting. Other colleges may offer a course or dedicate some class time to preparing students for work in educational contexts. But there is no identifiable curriculum designed to teach this particular specialization. Complicating matters further, not all educators in interpreting programs have background in educational interpreting themselves, so they may not be able to address the critical information about the teaching and learning context that the educational interpreters need to know to ensure school success for students who are dual language learners. Understanding dual language learner and primary language experience. For these reasons, it is crucial for interpreters working with very young deaf and hard of hearing children to be extremely proficient in their working language and to model both social and academic language in a way that is accessible to these children. Because interpreters are often the most proficient language models with whom these children consistently interact in school model setting. The most highly qualified interpreters should be recruited to work with language deprived or delayed students. Furthermore, little is known about how academic and discourse norms must be adjusted to include a third party who mediates communication, especially when the third party interpreter is not a native user of the language used to access discourse, in this case Americanism. language, or other form of sign language. Roles and responsibilities of educational interpreters. Role confusion is a particular source of frustration for many interpreters in educational settings, especially when the range of roles conflict with the interpreter's primary obligation of interpreting of or preparing to interpret. The time delay interpreters need to process the incoming message code very well cause students who need to wait for an interpretation before they can answer to come to the unfortunate conclusion that there is no point in trying to answer a question because by the time they can answer, the class has already moved on. And then, summary and conclusion. Implication for future research. Taylor suggests that when hiring educational interpreters, administration should assess an interpreter's skill, expertise, knowledge of the subject's matter, and ability to suit the needs of the situation and the individual child. Since deaf and hard of hearing students may not have had exposure to the same linguistic and cultural capital and fonts acknowledged as their hearing classmates. Scholars in the field of interpreter education have not reached consensus about the role of educational interpreters in consideration of the learning, language, and social emotional needs of deaf and hard of hearing children in mainstream educational environment because of the impact that interpreters likely have on students' language and school experience. There is a pressing need for research on the work of educational interpreters, particularly in primary school setting or in all instances in which deaf and hard of hearing students or immigrant students might not yet have developed a solid language foundation in any way. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.